Hello there and welcome. This is Farm Life, and it's great connecting with you once again here on YouTube. And I'm just here today to share something very practical. And I know that you have been waiting. Most probably you brought in a batch of birds and you have fed them, you have been feeding them, you have been taking care of those birds, and you are wondering, like, when am I going to have my first egg? I'm just here today to share with you 6 very important signs that once you spot those signs in your chicken house or you spot those signs on your birds, you should be rest assured that your first eggs are right around the corner. Of course, you don't want to keep feeding the birds without any clue as to when they are going to lay. Believe me, if you follow what I'm about to teach you, then you can predict as to the specific date your first egg or your first eggs are going to land. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button and of course turn on the notification bell so you get notified just when we drop our next video. This is one of those videos that will be very practical. You should stick around, watch the video right on to the end, and certainly keep growing. This is Farm Life. All right, welcome back. We are just going to move in. As you can see, our birds are doing okay. Remember, I said earlier on in my previous video that they are already laying. Yes, our birds are already laying, and as I always say, it's the joy of every farmer. Feeding birds for like 16 to 18 weeks is not easy without them laying. So it always brings joy when you see your first egg. When you see your first egg, it gives you hope because you know first that you have been doing the right thing. You are sure that if one has been able to lay within the time that it's supposed to lay, you are very sure that every other bird is going to lay. Very different as to when the birds are supposed to lay, maybe latest week 18, depending on the breed that you're dealing with, and at week 18, week 19, week 20, you haven't yet found your first egg. It probably shows that there is a problem. I'll be handling that probably on another video, but as I earlier mentioned, there are a number of signs that I'll be giving you today, that when you find those signs, then worry not. Just know that in a bit your birds will be laying. In 2 days, in 3 days, in a day, the next tomorrow your birds will be laying, because these were all signs that I practically spotted on my farm and I predicted, and my prediction was so accurate. All right, the first thing I want to talk about in no specific order is the fact that when your birds are getting ready to start dropping their eggs, when they're getting ready to lay, you discover that their wattles begin to change. Yes, the wattles grow quite bigger, and not just bigger, but they become very bright in color. You see, as to when they are still growing, when they are not yet laying, what you have is just some slightly grown pink wattles. When you look at this bird here, you look at the wattles are there, but you'll bear with me that it's not very red as the wattle of a laying hen should be, and it's not also very overgrown as a wattle of a laying hen should be. This is simply to tell you that wattle color and wattle size a lot is a very important indicator as to the fact that your birds are beginning to lay. And the second thing you notice about this bird here is the fact that the voice is not heard. You know, laying birds have a sound. They have a kind of a tone that they produce either when they are about laying, dropping the egg, or immediately after they lay, or just at every time. But once a bird begins to lay, you just discover that the sound of its tone or her tone begins to change. But with this, you'll notice that the sound is not that sound that we are looking for, contrary to another bird that I'm going to pick around, and we are going to look at that. So the first thing I've spoken about the colors of their wattles. Let's try to spot a bird here that has wattles that are grown. You look at this bird here now, comparing the wattles of this bird to the first one that I took earlier on, you discover that the wattles here, and not just the wattles and the combs, they are grown, quite grown, and it's also reddish in color. So the color of the wattle, as I've earlier explained, and the colors of the combs and the sizes are a very serious indicator as to the fact that your first egg is on the line. The second thing you'll notice about this particular bird is the voice, you discover that it's not just very loud, it has a voice that is quite deep, and it has that voice of a laying hen. So besides the combs and the wattles that you can use as an indicator to the fact that your birds are laying, you also look at you listen to the voice. Believe me, entering here today or this week and entering here 4 weeks ago is very different. The third thing you want to use as an indicator to know that your birds are soon going to be laying is the fact that you have a lot of feathers inside of your chicken house. Come on, look at my background. You discover that we have a lot of feathers here, a whole lot. You look at a place as this, you discover that feathers the litter is mixed up with a whole lot of feathers. So when birds are beginning to approach their laying stage or their laying age, they begin to drop off a lot of feathers. This dropping of feathers is particular to when they are about laying. But another very important sign that your birds are approaching laying stage is, of course, the water intake and their feed intake increases. Yes, believe me, their water intake, I'm sure you know that an egg is over 70 to 80% water liquid, and that liquid primarily comes from the water that they take. So for them to be able to lay, their water intake is supposed to increase, it's supposed to step up. So if their water intake is still very normal as to how it was while they were still growing up, while approaching laying, if the water intake is still very normal, then there's a problem, because summarily weeks before they start laying, we can estimate their water intake to be at about 150 to 200 milliliters. But once they start laying, a bird will drink close to 300 milliliters of water. Generally, water intake increases. Generally, also feed intake increases. That's normal, because as the bird grows older in age, of course, feed intake is supposed to increase. So besides that, another very common thing that you observe inside of here is that when you approach a laying hen, what you observe this squatting behavior. Let's look at this. Now look at this. When I look at this bird here, from the wattles and the combs, I can tell that it's already laying or it's about to lay. And then when you listen to the voice, it will tell you that it's about to lay. Obviously, feed intake and water intake has increased. But when I approach it, you discover that there's this submissive behavior that the bird has. You see that, right? Yes, there's this submissive behavior that laying birds have. As you approach them, they begin to squat. That squatting is, of course, proof that certain hormones in their body that is responsible for egg production is already reacting. Just look at this. You see that, right? So this you see here is another very important sign that your birds are beginning to lay. This one is very common. Once you find this one, believe me, your eggs are around the corner. So if I approach any bird that is laying or is about to lay, you see this. You look at this other one here, is squatting. But if I approach a bird that is not laying, you see that when I approach her, she runs away. If I approach this, she runs away. Another very important sign as to the fact that your hen is about laying or your flocks are about laying is that you discover that their pelvic bones begin to widen up. The space in between begins to expand. Let me take this bird for example that lays. So this is a hen here, and of course we have the pelvic region down here, we have the vent here. You discover that in between these two legs we have the pelvic bone. There are two bones here. An indicator that a bird is about to lay is the fact that your two fingers most probably are able to sit in between those two bones. Yeah, if your two fingers are not able to sit in between those two bones, believe me, the hen still has time. You still have work to do. You still have to feed them until the pelvic bones begin to expand and expand in such a way that an egg can pass through that region. So this for me is one of those most accurate signs. Once I discover that the pelvic bones of my hen has expanded, has widened in such a way that my two fingers can pass through, it's a sign that an egg can as well pass through that pelvic region. And it's an indicator as to the fact that your birds are ready to start laying. And should, in case you are wondering how maybe you have already laying flocks and you want to also identify the flocks there that are not laying, an easy way of identifying flocks that are not laying is if you find a flock whose pelvic bones are closed, or an egg cannot pass through that pelvic region, or probably your two fingers cannot sit in between the pelvic region, then be rest assured that that hen isn't laying. But I'll do a video on the channel how to identify hens amongst your flock that are not laying, so that you don't keep feeding flocks that are not productive. Of course, the reason you're feeding your birds is because you want them to lay, is because you want them to produce eggs. So I've spoken about the color of their wattles and the color of their combs. I've spoken about the increased feather droppings. I've spoken about increased appetite for food, increased water consumption. I've spoken about the squatting behavior. I've spoken about increase in the pelvic bones. The last thing I want to talk about, just discover that your birds have an unusual appetite to sit in their nesting boxes. It's also a very, very great sign as to the fact that your hens are ready to lay. Once you discover that they start spending time in their nesting boxes, they just start sitting there, it's also an indicator that the birds are getting set to begin laying. I've also spoken about their voices. So if you are still finding your hens far from these behaviors that I've listed, then come on, you still have work to do. Just keep feeding them, just keep doing the routine practices that you have to do. Keep maintaining your biosecurity. Make sure they always have adequate water. Believe me, there's a particular weight threshold that a bird must reach before it's able to lay, and your breeder should have shared that with you, or the person you, or the company that supplies birds, day old chicks to you, should have told you that at maybe 1.4 kilograms or 1,400 grams, 1,500, at a particular weight threshold, those birds should begin laying. So if your birds are not yet laying, go ahead, take the weight to see if they have arrived the weight threshold that was given to you by the breeder. And if you have to feed them more, you just need to feed them. You also look at your feet and all of those things. Always make sure you have a feeding plan. Not just a vaccination plan. Make sure you have a feeding plan that shows you that at this week, from this week to this week, this is what my birds are consuming, so that they can reach this particular weight threshold. If that is done, then believe me, you are going to have your birds begin to lay just when they should lay. I hope you learned and grabbed something from this video. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you get notified just when we drop a new video. And this is Farm Life, and from here we say bye.